intention of this committee to inflict that kind of disrespect and for the towns not to be able to at least have comment. I apologize for that, for their misbehavior.
Thank you.
And hopefully we can, through legislation, correct some of these areas.
Great. Thank you.
And I'm
Thank you.
sorry you lost your industrial.
That won't come
area.
back for a while, that's for sure.
Is the industrial, who controls the industrial park? Does the town, or is there an industrial authority that does it?
It was between the landowners and the town, and the landowners had the final
Okay.
say, of course, because it hadn't moved, and so they sold it out from under us.
But the landowner wanted the project, is that what?
They were trying to keep it for us while we were doing water and feasibility studies to get, you know, a municipal water and sewer to it. And time has gone by, things have happened, like Irene, and put us 2 steps back. So they had the opportunity to sell the land, and they did. The developer had deeper pockets than we sure could grab. So
Okay.
Sorry if I missed it, but did you say something about a town plan that does have some?
absolutely, we were very firm in this brand new town plan about being for renewable energy, but there is a place for it. And we actually have centers where we would have accepted it. It's just, they have not looked at that at all, and
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Is Joel Clark here?
Yeah, he is super happy.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Morning. Morning.
Morning.
Joel Clark, Swanton Select Board Vice Chair, DRB Chair. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here today.
From what town?
Swanton,
Swanton.
sorry about that, Swanton.
Do you know this member over here?
I would say we live about 30 feet apart, maybe 40.
Shame on you.
That's too much information.
Too much information. Anyway, I understand.
Excuse me,
Yes.
I would like, I'm not gonna make any clarification on this, it's a property one, you know. But I would like to thank General Clark for his military service. He has done a few tours of Iraq, and I want to thank you on behalf of Honduras and the United States.
You're most
Thank you so
welcome.
much.
Thank you very much. Okay, so as part of what you're going to hear from me, you've heard from other people, but I'm not sure that's a bad thing that it gets repeated a few times here. And I certainly want to make it clear that I'm all for sensible, renewable energy. I understand why we need to get off from fossil fuels, and I fully support renewable energy that is done in a responsible and deliberate manner. Talk to the other members of the select board, and they certainly feel the same. With regards to renewable site-ins, I'm going to speak mostly about wind generators because that is what has come before us. We have not had a lot of solar site-in up in Swanton yet. We are sure it's going to be coming though. The process has been very educational, something we never really expected to get as deep into as we have. It's also been very frustrating and probably more frustrating than educational. And the first frustration I bring up is I don't think the Public Service Board was created to handle the large number and the scope of the renewable projects, both wind and solar. I think it was set up for things like the McNeil plant, hydro projects, transmission, distribution lines, etc. And also they watch over the rates that people have to pay for their utilities. Having the PSB be the sole approver of wind and solar projects totally removes the local municipality from the process. We're aware, minor changes were made recently to law, but we feel that the deck is stacked against us, especially a community that's opposed to a project. Our select board is currently struggling with how much money it should spend to oppose a project that both the planning commission and the select board unanimously oppose. We also took it to a vote to the community, 5-1 voted in opposition to the specific project, and also 5-1 thought that there should be local control of renewable energy siting, especially the large scale siting. When you look at how the PSB holds it here and what is submitted by the applicant for project approval, it would cost the town tens of thousands, if not maybe $100,000 to try to defend. I should say defend, we don't want to defend this particular project, we want to oppose it, but you're talking a large amount of money. Should we put that burden on our taxpayers? It's something we struggle with. Some of the criteria, if you take a look at some of the projects that have been submitted, and I reviewed the Georgia Mountain project, the criteria is subjective in nature. So after we spent this large amount of money, if PSB, 3 people, decide they're going to approve it, they're going to approve it. We've heard that the state might propose to hire a person to help local communities sort out the permitting process. In my opinion, you're wasting your money. While it might make everybody feel good and think we've done something to improve the process, it's not going to, because unless you have expert testimony before the PSB, you're not going to get anywhere. Another frustration that we have is there's not specific siting criteria for the large scale wind projects. How close to a budding neighbor should a 499-foot wind generator be placed? How close to a residence should they be placed? There's no definitive criteria out there. Some states have adopted it, some countries, when you look online, have certain distances. We don't have that here in Vermont. It's a free-for-all. In Swanton, the Select Board and Planning Commission do not want large-scale wind generators of any sort on our scenic vistas. Most of us on the boards remember why Vermont has no billboards, and why, as part of regional planning, we have scenic corridors identified. Particular to Swanton is the current application is to install 7 499-foot industrial wind turbines on a place called Rocky Ridge. So as you look to the east toward Rocky Ridge, you look to the north, as you're looking east, and then you look to the left to the north, that ridge is extended several miles. You look to the south, the same thing. How many wind generators over the course of time are going to be put there? When people look at how profitable this is right now, when's it going to stop? Do we really want to cover all of Vermont's treasured ridge lines with these eyesores? I invite any of the committee members to come up and take a look, and I think you'll understand why I'm so passionate. Our board's also concerned about negative issues associated with large-scale wind generation. We're concerned about the impact from the large amount of land clearing that takes place on these ridge lines. This particular project is going to clear more than 35 acres of forest and natural habitat. Habitat considered the highest habitat block in the Northwest region. We're also concerned about impact to the wildlife, to include deer. There's a good deer yard up there, bear, birds, etc. Health impacts. Mr. Recchia came before the board, and we understand it's not considered a real public health issue in the sense that not everybody gets sick from wind generators, but I think if you do enough research and you look, you'll find out it does affect different people. So there is an impact. I don't know how anyone could refute that. We're concerned about decommissioning. The lifespan of the generators is purported to be 20 years, so maybe the last 25, 30 years, we don't know. What happens after that? Yes, they've got to put a bond up. Are they even going to be here when it's time for decommissioning? Who's going to enforce it? How do we remove a 30-foot deep concrete foundation? Is that even realistic? So what is the real plan, and how is it going to be enforced? These are some big questions that are out there. And then we're concerned about the impact of the local property owners. 134 homes within 1 mile of this project. Who's going to compensate for reduced property values? And then how we're going to handle the town having lost revenue from the devalued property. With regard to both the 7 wind turbine project in Swanton and the large-scale solar project proposed for Highgate, the governor stated that power is not needed in Franklin County, and also that there's not transmission lines to remove it from Franklin County and bring it somewhere else. The ratepayers, if I understand this properly, are going to have to absorb the cost of putting those transmission lines in. How crazy is that? This issue was addressed. I took a look at the state's 2016 Comprehensive Energy Plan. It talks about it right in there. How's the PSB going to address that? We don't know that, so we spend tens of thousands to find out. And more important, what if they don't address it? And then our rates go up because we got to build these transmission lines that don't exist for this power. So part of why I'm here today is I was asked to give recommendations. The first one's a pretty tough one. I think we should ban large-scale wind projects in the state of Vermont and protect our precious ridge lines and those who live near them. If we don't want to ban it, then we ought to put a 2 to 3 year moratorium on it until we get some siting criteria out there and get a clear path for the PSB on how they're going to do these approvals. The 2013 Governor's Energy Site-In Policy Commission provided many recommendations on renewable energy site-in, and in there they said a lot of it's going to require legislative change. So I encourage this committee to help get that legislative changes made, get the legislative changes made. A moratorium would allow that to be figured out, what should be done properly, and then get the changes made. And then, from our standpoint, local control should go back to the community. One thing I learned here today, again, I mentioned I haven't been involved in the solar piece, but when I hear that solar panels will be putting up in these industrial parks and stuff, and the local community has no say on that after they've invested thousands and thousands of dollars in these industrial parks, there's something wrong with that. I encourage the review of the Queechee criteria. Someone else is going to speak, if they haven't already, and they did an eloquent job, that it doesn't work. You can't satisfy that Queechee criteria in trying to say that the wind towers are not going to be offensive to people. I don't even know how anybody could make that determination. And then, specific to Swanton, a Met tower was put up without a permit. And right now, I haven't heard the final of how the PSB is going to address it, but maybe a trivial fine, a couple $1,000s. They got a 2-year jump on the process by not submitting the required paperwork and permit. I think the law should be changed so that the penalty will be is if you took 20 months, you jump-started the process by 20 months, that's how long you're going to wait till you submit your application to the PSB. Regarding large-scale solar projects, I know there's a lot being done to, I shouldn't say a lot, I know there's stuff being done to refine the siting criteria. Currently, the towns now are allowed, I guess, to put screening in the bylaws. I don't think that's enough, so I think towns need to be given more authority. Really concerned about the loss of farmland and industrial, the developable land. I know none of this is easy, but action is needed by the legislature. And I think the action is needed now. The process is out of control. I think a lot of people are going to say that today. Big money is taking this process over. If we don't act, I think we're all going to regret what has taken place. And I found it real interesting reading the Messenger last night that some of this energy being produced is being sold out of state along with the renewable energy credits. So on the back of Vermonters, we're going to satisfy other states' renewable energy credit issues and power requirements. That's insane. Thanks for allowing me to speak today, and I'll gladly answer any questions.
You had mentioned something about how when this power is generated, it would kind of overstress the grid up in that area.
Yes.
How do you know that?
The governor made that statement. It's in the 2016 Comprehensive Energy Plan. Green Mountain Power has stated that. The problem is, everybody can state that. It's 3 people appointed by the governor who are going to make that decision whether or not that project's allowed to go through. They might look at it, and hopefully they would, and say it doesn't make sense. We don't know that. And do we pay tens of thousands, $100,000 to go up there and fight it? Hey, we can get you that, the quotes.
I was curious. I wasn't.
Right, no, I mean, that's some of the frustration. If you can sense it in me, it's there for that reason.
So what I heard, Mary, was that the grid is done in sections. The section of the grid that we get our energy from is full for large projects.
Right, I just was curious.
So they
I
would have to
understand how the grid
expand,
works.
yeah, the grid would have to be expanded, which seems,
Yeah, it was listed in chapter 12 of the comprehensive energy plan. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to put in more transmission lines if we've already got all the energy we need up there. At least my opinion. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
And ditto on the thank you to the service.
Most welcome.
So we have 5 witnesses left on the list, and that may spill over into 2:15. So I'm just wondering if there's anybody who's scheduled to speak who can't stay until after our floor debate. Okay. Mary Boyer is next.
Mr. Chairman, and committee members for inviting us to be with you today and to hear our comments. I represent one of the smaller of the small towns in Vermont. We have about 319 voters but they're all active. So I'm here expressing my own views and also theirs.
What town is that?
You might ask, Wyndham,
Wyndham? Okay.
Mary, would you just start by stating your name for the record, please?
Mary Boyer.
Are you related to my wife?
I think you asked me that the last time I was here.
But I didn't do it on the record, now it's on the record.
I'm not.
Although we don't know.
Full disclosure, we don't know. We could do a little genealogy and all paths cross in the genealogical records, right? I'm addressing the wind development issue. And we'll give you a little bit of our history with the public service and then make some comments. And our history goes back to 2006. In 2006, Wyndham had a brief experience with a potential wind development on Glebe Mountain, which is to our west. After considerable public input and a town-wide poll, we wrote a new town plan, which was adopted and approved by the Wyndham Regional Commission in 2008. Common to take 2 years to do that. In it, with the expert guidance of the Regional Commission and a land use attorney, the town stated a clear prohibition against all but specific kinds of activities in our forested resource districts. That prohibition included meteorological towers as a precursor to industrial scale wind projects. The plan also states has an abundant support for the placement of renewable energy projects, small renewable energy projects in Wyndham. So if you move forward to 2012, an absentee landowner from out of the state who owns 5,000 acres between Wyndham and Grafton, which is nearly 25% of our land area, partnered with a $60 billion European corporation and announced their intention to place Met towers on their land in anticipation of developing an industrial wind installation. Representatives of both the landowner and the developer expressed publicly their indifference to the town plan, citing the authority of the Public Service Board. The application was filed 45 days later, and Wyndham entered the Public Service Board process. We stated our objection and cited the town plan. The correspondence between and among attorneys for the developer, the Department of Public Service, and the town are a matter of record. But eventually, the Public Service Department supported the Wyndham Town Plan in the strongest language on a variety of grounds, concluding that our town plan should be considered dispositive and the application for Met towers should be denied. The board granted the PCG. In docket number 7905, the order is reflected, and that came down on December 20th, 2012. In doing so, they not only disregarded the intentions of the town, but also the analysis and opinion of the department. The board then went further, and in a statement which foreshadows some of the recent finger-pointing between the board and the legislature with regard to siting issues, said this, and I'm reading from their order, quote, "We note that section 246 leaves the board no discretion to deny approval of a meteorological tower that meets applicable criteria. The statute requires that the board approve the project and issue a CPG," close quote. Let me note that the criteria referred to are from the law: aesthetics, historic sites, air and water purity, the natural environment, public health and safety, public investments, and the orderly development of the region. None of these criteria is likely to reach the threshold of concern regarding a Met tower, but the law leaves out any consideration of the very purpose
for which a permit is being sought. In their comments in the order, the board says further, and I quote again, "In addition, we conclude that concerns regarding the statutory directives contained in section 246B1 are more appropriately directed to the legislature rather than to the board the legislature has charged with implementing those directives." We've been invited here today to talk about our experience with the Public Service Board process. I cite this record of our experience as a way to show that it is not only Wyndham and the many towns who have signed the Rutland Resolution who feel the legislature should take another look at the roles of towns in citing decisions. The Public Service Board has said, if there is a problem with the process, it's your job. It seems necessary to point out that the authors of 248 never contemplated and never designed their legislation to cope with today's helter-skelter world of site-driven, speculative merchant power development. Neither did 248 anticipate renewable energy. In 2008, Section 246 further abridged towns' rights by making approval of things like Met Tower permits a virtual rubber stamp, even when they were described by the applicant as a precursor to a type of development prohibited by duly created and adopted town plans. In closing, whether Montpelier likes it or not, this state cannot operate without an effective system of town government. The real meaning of the kinds of protests and pushback you are seeing today goes to the heart of our system of government. Town plans are something that towns do together. They are as much a part of our fabric as town meeting. But the difference is that town meetings come and go. Town plans represent the durable expression of a community's vision and values with respect to how it will use its resources. My urgent request is that you take the advice of the Public Service Board and reconsider the implications of tossing aside the duly appointed plans and policies, the duly adopted plans and policies of elected officials and their constituents in the 247 Vermont municipalities. As you do so, consider if the public good is best served by draping a mantle of unassailable authority on a 3-person panel appointed by the governor. I would further respectfully request that you instruct the Public Service Board via legislation that their first responsibility is to ensure that Vermonters have access to the cleanest, least cost, base load power generated from the least locally destructive sources. None of us here today oppose renewable energy, but we strongly oppose the way it is being done and the false claims of why it is being done. If this problem is not fixed, it could jeopardize all of our renewable goals. Even a cursory examination of the data from the EPA regarding Vermont energy use and emissions profile will reveal that we cannot in any way affect the course of climate change by what we do. We're simply too small. There have been press reports of remarks by state officials that the push for renewables is mostly about jobs and development. So, if it's about that, business development, let's call it by name and manage it like we manage all other development involving land use decisions in the state by putting it under Act 250. I thank you for listening. I appreciate your time.
Just a quick one, you mentioned that you have a pretty robust planning process. Does it mention renewable energy in it?
About 8 times in a variety of places.
And you
Yeah.
have places where you would accept it?
We do. In fact, we have an energy committee, and they're considering a large piece of property behind one of our graveyards, and looking for grants for that and getting some reports on that. So yes, we're committed to renewables. We feel wind development is not appropriate for Vermont.
No wind development at
Yes,
all.
yes, our ridge lines are too precious. That cost in terms of our values and our appreciation by ourselves and the rest of the world of our physical beauty is too high a price to pay for energy that goes out of state. Any other?
Yes. The gentleman from Stratford was concerned about renewable energy credits being sold out of state. Is that a concern for your town
course.
and your
Of course,
energy
it's,
plans?
yes, I mean, one of the rationales for doing this is that it would reduce our carbon footprint, which is extremely low to begin with. But yes, we are concerned about that too.
Anybody else?
Yes.
You or someone was here last year testifying on this. I take it that nothing is any better this year than it was last year. Would that be appropriate?
Well, actually, it's worse.
Okay. I
Sorry you asked. I'm being a little bit facetious. The Met Towers were put in, we have 3 95-foot tall Met Towers spread out across this 5,000 acre piece of property. They were given a 3-year permit. That permit was extended the beginning of this year. We're not quite sure for how long, probably for another 3 years, because they're doing the research. Their research is delayed because they're finding some irregular wind patterns, and that particular ridge is shadowed by a taller mountain. So they are carefully looking at whether it's going to be a valuable investment for them. So we would have liked it to end and had the Met Towers taken down, but we weren't so lucky.
You would have liked
So
it
you may
if
see-
you didn't have him back here this year,
I was
right?
going to say, you may see me next year too. Anyone else? Chairman?
Thank you.
Thank you for driving up here today.
Thank you. It's a lovely ride.
Chris Violet?
I just want to remind folks that I have to leave at 10 of, so when I leave, I don't want anybody to think it's because of anything except that I had this appointment.